because I'm going to try to take what I consider a moderate position, um, starting off by saying that I am a lifelong Zionist. I was actually involved in a national organization in high school, and I have been a supporter of the idea of Israel um, as long as I can remember. At the same time, I recognize that, as Omanon said, there are other people involved, and these people are not necessarily involved in such things as the terrorist attacks or the rocket attacks or all the other things that have happened over the last 2 weeks and have been happening for 100+ years in the area. And that anything that is done to has to be done with taking the needs of these people in order to mean that there will be a Israel in the future, a solution that satisfies the bloodlust, however justified it might be, uh, without understanding that 20 years from now there has to be a stable peace, is just short-sighted. So that's my little bit. I will throw in some other stuff later.
I've
I
got
yield
something
my
to
time.
say. I, I've been reading a book. It's incredible. It's upset me a great deal. It's the name of it is Because They Hate. It's by Bridget Gabrielle. Um, she talks about Islam jihad, the extremists. Now, clearly, this is a small group of people relative to all Islamists, but they their their objective is to change everybody in the world to being an Islamist. Um, and this book is about um, Bridget. She's an Arab Christian. She's actually Catholic. It was around the time of the '67 war. So at that time period, she was in. She lived in a town in Lebanon, which was most Catholic. Some of them are Eastern Rite Catholics, and there were other Christians. There were Islamists there, and they were all living relatively peaceful. And then all of a sudden, there was an attack um, by the extremists, and because of the attack, she then spent the next 8 years. Her family was well-to-do. They had a nice house. They had people over all the time. Um, and because of the attack, her house was destroyed. Her She spent the next 8 years living in a 12 by 12 by 8 feet high um, bomb shelter, only to come out to gather food and water. Um, their main meal of the day was soup. They got water from the stream and grass around the house, and that was their meal. Just soup made from grass, water and grass.
Mm.
Uh, the Islamic extremists attacked everybody in the area. Jewish, Christian, Hindu, doesn't matter. Um, I think Omanon can talk about the uh, what happened in his section of um, what was it, India, um, by Pakistan. The I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. What her main point is, they are not the extremists are not going to change. They haven't changed since Muhammad led the new religion, Islam, out of the Middle East and North, and there's been chaos ever since. And they're not going to stop. And it's just a fact of life. And, you know, 100 years, 500 years from now, they'll be attacking Israel, will be attacking them back. Other people will be attacking. I mean, going on for what, 1700 years. There's no expectation that it's going to stop soon. Um, so that's my point of view. Um, if it offends, I am sorry, but that's my point of view. Next.
Well, I understand the question about um, whether the Hamas attack was justified. I think we'll all agree it was not. Um, although it's a bit complicated because we don't really know, at least I don't really know, whether this was Hamas alone or Hamas being instigated by uh, the the government of Iran. Um, but that doesn't really change the unjustified nature of the original attack. My questions center around what what is best for Israel to do and what is best for the United States to do. Um, I'd like to echo what Robert said about being a supporter of Israel. I wouldn't call myself a Zionist, but I do find myself, and I think for many, many years, have been very leery of the Netanyahu government. I've been extremely critical about their moves, um, especially the resettlement of Israelites into what is the Palestinian enclave. Um, so it's kind of complicated by this. What should Israel do? Um, I think they kind of lose no matter what the situation, no matter what pathway they take. I think if they are very aggressive, they lose world opinion. And I think if they tend towards, well, negotiation or very limited attacks, I think that it will tell Hamas that they have won, that they Hamas have won, because the response is very, very weak. So that's there's a variety of responses. Also, we have Iran, and Iran has nukes, well, or will have nukes, probably in what, 2-3 years, I guess that's the best guess. And they don't need much of a delivery system since the distances are very short between Iran and Israel. So Israel has to really worry about responses from Iran. And Israel is a small country and it would never survive a nuclear attack. Whereas we might expect the Israelites to nuke the people in Iran in return. But Iran is a huge country, much smaller population density, probably better able to survive after a nuclear attack. But this is a very, very complicated situation. What is best for the United States is not at all clear either to me. I think that we would love to see survival of Israel, but we can't afford another wider war. We have enough going on with North Korea and with Ukraine, and having to support Israel in the Mideast might be more than we can do. So I think we have to identify what these various policies are and have a go at it. I hope our administration is wise enough to do that. Luckily, we have a Congress back again, maybe, and so we are able to take some actions. But it is sure a complicated situation. And that ends my long rambling dissertation.
Pat is waiting, has been patiently waiting.
Who, me?
Yep. Yeah, that's
Oh,
Pat.
sorry. No, I wanted to be attuned. I wasn't even sure of the subject matter, but needless to say, it is a fascinating situation. It's more than just on top of us at this moment. As was indicated, we stand to be involved in so much more if we continue along the road that we have chosen. The only thing that bothers me, I have non-Jewish pride of the Jewish people. I think that they really have made a significant effort to not only state that they are here part of our world, but that they're a very integral part of our world. They've made a great big statement. Going back to the original, the founding, I personally have some mixed feelings with regard to how I know that there were Israelis who stayed in that area where Israel is now. There was some, but it was predominantly Arab, at least for a good many years. When the situation with regard to the Jews seeking a homeland and trying very hard to get into that area of the Middle East where they're currently located, there were all kinds of problems. They fought and they won. And I think that based on that, they have a right to that homeland. Needless to say, the Arabs disagreed, and the fight goes on. I don't know how they can, if there was some way of validating the fact that the Jews do have a right, not because they fought and won, but because they had an initial right to that land. I think it would be extremely difficult to convince the Arabs. I know that we're a very, very long way, but it's basically the same argument. The reason the Arabs have done this, as they've done before, is because they don't think that the Jewish people, the Jewish population, should be there. They want to, as they've indicated openly so many times, they want to drive them into the Mediterranean. I don't know if there has been enough discussion with regard to, everything seems to be, who's right now? Who attacked who right now? I guess the point I'm trying to make is I don't know if they could go back to the original founding and prove that the Jews had a right to be there. maybe not initially in the numbers. They had to fight for it. They had to fight quite a bit, and they prevailed. And from that moment, they grew. It's the same. I mean, the reason the Arabs attacked now is for that very same reason. I guess what I'm trying to express is that I wonder if they could go back and try to resolve that whole issue. The Jews were eventually, they agreed to a certain piece of land. Since then, as we know, it has expanded because of war and whatnot. But the original argument is still there, and that's exactly why this last one just took place. They're still fighting over the same thing. They don't think the Jews belong there. I don't know how, but if there was a way of having a discussion, a meeting, an understanding that could come to the conclusion that the Jews do have a right to be in that land. I know someone is going to say, well, no, that's because they're fighting back and forth now. There's been so much disagreement, but it all stems from that very, very initial settlement, the initial settling of the Jews in that area. I don't see any reason for it to cease. I think it's going to continue. This has been it's a hiatus. It is finally, I would say, is certainly, and we still haven't really stopped. The Jewish army is on the verge of destroying what's left of what the Arabs owned. It's just going to continue. I wish there was another way, and I don't know how. I wish there was another way of, they've tried talking to one another. It hasn't worked. The Jews have been successful in taking land. They're even that piece of land that now fronts, oh God, help me, my memory, Syria. That fronts Syria is that piece of land that is located between Syria and Israel is now the big bone of contention. How can we give the Jews a fairness? This is your land, it's yours. We're not going to fight over it. I don't know if there's an answer. I really don't. It stems from that very beginning. I wish there was a way that, and of course, with the Arabs, you don't know who you're fighting. There are just so many different factions that seem to, if it's not Iraq, then it's Syria. It's the people that are I can't remember the names of them, but they have so many people that are opposed to them. The only group of Arabs that they seem to have befriended are the Egyptians at this point. Is there a solution? Is there a way that they can appease all of the Arabs at one time? They have certainly tried, and it's turned to war again. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I have only hope. I have hope that somehow there will be an Arab leader who will say, we don't want to fight anymore. We don't want to, eat, whether it's Hamas or whether it's Syria or whatnot. It seems as though it's it seems to be one of the Arab factions after another for one reason or another through the years. Right now, it's the Palestinians. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I have only hope that somehow, and as was indicated very nicely, we're on the edge of the possibility of something that could be much. When I see the United States sending in battleships right to the coast of Israel to protect Israel, I mean, we're making a very, very bold statement, and I don't know. It's not good. It's not good at all. I don't know.
Well,
Mayors are not going to do it, but
let me say a
I
couple of
don't
words.
see it
Then
ever.
go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is a couple of words. Number one is that I understand what all of you talked about. We have, it does need a bold leadership from Arabs and Israel and United States together somehow to create some kind of a deal without appeasement and without letting Israel down, and at the same time letting the Arabs also feel that they are also people. But here is the complication from as I see it. Complication is that you have Hamas, that is a social organization, that's a political organization, and it has a military wing. And whatever the political wing decides, the military takes over, and then they go and kill people. And unfortunately, the behind the scenes, there are forces that play with Hamas and play with the Hezbollah at the same time. And those people have a lot of money. And it's a big player is Iran. And that's what one of the problems right now is, that Abrahamic Accords was supposed to bring the Arabs and Israelis together somehow. But at the same time, that again gave rise to that, oh, my power is being taken away, I better do something. So that inherent problem within the Middle East, within the Arab people who are discordant to begin with, let alone Israel, they have to reconcile themselves first within the power sharing, that argument they have between themselves, between the Shia people and the Sunni people and different ethnic groups and the tribals, and that has to be solved somehow. I don't know whether that can ever be solved, as it was pointed out, maybe next 2,000 years, never, but somehow it has to be tried. So keep that in mind. Go ahead, Paul.
I see the only irrational solution is that all Jews decide to be Islamic. Now that's absurd, but that's the only thing that's going to stop.
Should they be Shia?
In this generation, the next generation, in the 2,000 years.
The problem with what you're suggesting is, should the Jews who say, okay, I give up, I'm going to be Islamic, should they be Shia or Sunni or one of the other factions? And will that really solve anything, since the Shia and the Sunni have been fighting for 1,500 years?
Okay, we have been ignoring a possible solution, and that is, if Israel were at some point to have a secular government that would induce a two-nation solution, which, by the way, the United States definitely favors, would that cut the legs out from under Hamas? And of course, it really is a big question mark, but I have personally always favored that solution. Because yes, the Israelis have been there for thousands of years, but so have the Palestinians. And I believe the Palestinians also have a right to have a nation. And so I just pose that question: would a two-nation solution be a more profitable path for all concerned?
By the way, let me start by saying I totally agree with the idea of a two-state solution, but let me explain a minor complication. In 2005, Israel, which had occupied Gaza for, I think, 30 years, made a unilateral decision that they would withdraw, pull their troops, basically say, okay, we're done. the Palestinians in Gaza, the Gaza residents, will decide their future. The assumption was that they would, along with the West Bank, elect the PLO, and that would be the beginning of a two-state solution. By the way, there was a relatively close to a two-state solution much earlier, and a Jewish extremist assassinated the prime minister of Israel, Rabin, which kind of scuttled that. But let's go back to 205 for a moment. 205, Israel withdrew. They told the settlers who had begun to settle in Gaza, you're either a citizen of Gaza or you're an Israeli. If you're Israeli, come home. So about 800 settlers were left along with the Israeli army with their personal possessions, but all the improvements, all the farms, whatever, were left to the Gazans. The Hamas burnt all of those things because obviously they were contaminated. In 2007, there was an election and Hamas won. One of the ways they won was a lot of the activists for the PLO were tossed off of roofs very publicly. And there's been no election since. So the attempt of Israel to turn over this occupied territory to the population created Hamas and this situation that exists now. So although I totally agree that there needs to be a two-state solution, it can't be a two-state solution with Hamas or something similar being in charge, because they will just continue to do what they have been doing. The idea of a two-state solution is you may not like the guy across the border, but at least you don't fight with each other. You don't bomb each other. You don't send people to kill other people on buses, and you don't bomb each other. So it seems like a simple solution, one I favor, but it isn't simple. And we could be making things worse rather than better. All right. My current rant is done.
Okay. Pat wanted to say something, actually.
Pat?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you ready for the next time?
I'm I'm trying to solve the problem. I'm trying to solve the problem in my head. I don't know. It's, sometimes I think that there are just too many people interested in the other side. It's not just Hamas. It's Hamas representing the Palestinian people, but I think it's Hamas too, to some degree, opposed to the Israelis representing some faction. I don't know exactly what, but some faction of the Arab world. I mean, you've got so many people that are opposed to them. The only country recently that seems to be at least normal or whatnot is Egypt. They
also Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan also. Jordan has been, but there have been moments in the past. I don't remember exactly what. There have been moments in the past when they have disagreed with the Jews too.
Mm.
So you write down Israel, and then you draw a line on the other side. You have to write down not only Hamas but the Palestinians in general. I don't think you can find many Palestinians who are going to say. I'm sure there are some, but they're very few. Yes, the Jews deserve a homeland, and we should try to work out something with them. But you've got the Syrians, you've got the Iraqis that are opposed, you've got
Iran.
There's so many factions that the Jews are having. The biggest miracle in the world is when they were able to rout all of those countries during that war. Whatever it was, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever. I don't know. I don't know. I can't offer a solution. Every time I think about it, I tend to go back to what the initial issue was, that the Jews came back to their homeland. There were some Jews there. They weren't predominant. The Arabs were predominant, but the Jews came and they fought for it. They were attacked. They were told to get out, and they even had to fight the British. And they did, and they won. So no matter how you look at it, they have a right to be there. Now, even given the fact that everyone is trying to, everyone around us is trying
Can
to,
I give a little bit of history? We talk about the right to be there.
yeah,
Going back 150 years, there was a movement in Europe among the Jewish population, which was being raped, pillaged, etc., by the majority Christian surrounding populations, that there was no place in Europe for Jews. They had to go somewhere. And because of religious reasons and historical reasons, they said, okay, we're going to go back to Palestine. And there was a fair amount of money being raised, and that money was used to buy, B-U-Y, land in Palestine from the owners who had tenant farmers. So somebody would go to somebody in Beirut and say, hey, I want to buy that plot of land, however they described it. And they'd give him some money, and the guy would say, fine, okay. You go and tell the people who are there they have to leave. It's kind of like an apartment building. I'm paying rent. I've maybe lived there several generations. And the owner of the apartment building sells the apartment building to someone else who, rather than just continue picking up and charging rent like they were in the past, says, I bought this building because I want to move my parents in. I want to move my siblings in, my cousins. You have to leave. You've been a good tenant. We like you very much, but you got to go because I need this building for something else. And that's what happened to the Palestinians, tenant farmers. They were told leave. So there was a lot of resentment, understandable. And
150 years ago.
About 150 years ago, then after a few years after that, the most liberal country in the world, which was most tolerant of all kinds of people, particularly Jews, France, had a problem where there was the army had some serious issues.
Yeah.
And the leadership of the army decided that they were going to blame a colonel whose name was Dreyfus. He was a Jew, and he was blamed for all of this stuff. And suddenly France, this wonderful liberal place, had an outpouring of anti-Semitic propaganda, etc. Turned out that Dreyfus was cleared. But this caused some other Jews in France to say, even in France you can't be safe. We have to have a homeland. We have to have a place to go. And that was really the beginning of modern day Zionism. And a lot of money was raised and a lot of land was bought in Palestine. Most of the people who moved there at that point in time were European intellectuals, who, by the way, knew absolutely nothing about farming. They had never been allowed to own land, so there was no way that they could learn. But so they set up socialist or communist communities where everybody kind of worked together. And it worked out, and they did pretty well. And this was going on until the 30s, when suddenly it was illegal, punishable by death to be Jewish.
In the
And the Muslim leadership basically went along with it. As anti-Semitic as Hitler was, he found allies in the Middle East. So he's kind of supported some of these Muslim leaders. After the world found out about what had happened in the Holocaust, half of the world's Jewish population was killed, in most cases burnt to a crisp, out of guilt. They said, okay, we're not going to fight this idea of dividing up Palestine. They understood that there was a Palestinian population there, but they weren't going to fight it. They worked out a deal. They said, okay, this part will be Israel, and other parts will be Palestinian. They didn't actually set up a government. Maybe if the Palestinians had, at the same time that Israel declared their government, if the Palestinians had done the same thing, things would have been different, but they didn't. The moment Israel, literally the moment that they declared that they were a state, the surrounding Arab armies invaded to wipe them out. They told the Palestinian population, leave. We don't want to worry about whether we're killing our own people or not. If you leave, we'll destroy Israel. You can come back, and not only can you have your own land back, but you can have all these very successful farms and businesses, etc. Well, it didn't work. For a whole bunch of reasons, it didn't work. And Israel survived. And a large percentage, millions of people who used to be residents of Palestine, went to the surrounding Arab countries. But they were put into refugee camps, and they were never allowed to leave. There were mines outside the refugee camps, not between Israel and the camp, but between the camp and the surrounding Arab nations. So it festered, and everybody in the camp was told, the reason you're here is because the Jews stole your land. They kicked you out. They're illegal. They're horrible. And oh, by the way, they're like the West. They're the Crusaders, the modern Crusaders, who came in and tried to kick the Muslims out of Jerusalem. So that's kind of the history. Now, there were various wars after that, and we could spend a lot of time talking about that. But the net result was not only did Israel survive, but it expanded, in part because Israel has its own extremists who said, the Bible said this is what Israel is. And it was promised. And so we are going to do everything we can to fulfill the promise. And the West Bank is a perfect example of that. The Jewish extremists are playing into the hands of the Arab extremists, and the Arab extremists are playing into the hands of the Jewish extremists. I personally believe it's the extremists on all sides. If we talk at all about Johnson being the speaker, again, it's the extremists. Whenever you get extremists involved who say it's got to be this way, no compromise, my way or the highway, and if it causes us to burn down the house with all the people in it, so be it, because when we rebuild, probably we'll do a better job. Maybe not, but we can always burn it down again. Okay. Another rant. Finish.
Well,
You know, one
Which
interesting,
brings us to the next topic.
yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that actually gives a segue to the Mike Johnson topic, that we have a new speaker, new way to look at the Constitution, and new beginning. And let us see how you can figure him out. All right, you
Okay.
can go and talk about him.
We're going to get him out.
Huh? I'm sorry.
We're going to get him by 2024. The Republicans have proven that they are incapable. This present group is incapable of functioning. We've had a history of successful functioning Republicans, but the Republicans right now are whacked out and gone dingling. That's the way I see it. They're to follow Trump, who is a 90-something times indicted criminal, and right now that people are turning on him left and right in the in the trials that he's about to have, and he knew exactly that he lost before the insurrection, and my opinion is that he is absolutely guilty, 100% guilty of insurrection, and should never take another public office ever again. That's my opinion. Next.
Well, I was just going to add to this before I give the mic to somebody else, is that that's an interesting point you bring up about Trump, but you got to recognize that the Speaker Johnson had the backing of this guy. That's how he won. And at the same time, you have to see that he's a younger person. He is going to create things what he likes about Trump. And no matter whether Trump is indicted or not, you have to recognize also there are people who support him. He is probably going to win. And I can let other folks talk about it now.
Well, I will say that Trump in 2015 didn't create the MAGA movement. He named it, but he didn't create it. It was there. He latched on to what was already there. And if anything, it has gotten bigger, in part because of Trump and his personality. But America has always had this, I will call it, autocratic belief that if only people did it my way, everything would be good. And it's all these other people who keep it getting in the way from everything being the way I think it should be. And I am very worried. I mean, DeSantis is a capable Trump. He's proved that he can make all kinds of really, I consider, not everybody does, but I consider really bad things the law, and get away with it. And if you believe in the rule of law, then there are a whole bunch of things which I think are wrong, which are now the law in Florida, going to be the law, if not already, in Texas and a few other places. And it's because there is a belief, a population that says, we need all this stuff and we'll make it happen. You know, the old thing about the football team doing whatever it takes to win. You take that a little bit further, and that's what we have right now in politics.
I am wondering, I wonder whether the so-called Trump base, or as Hillary Clinton put it, the deplorables, I wonder if they will follow people like DeSantis or Johnson, who are really smooth Ivy League dudes, and who speak very well, and they have their conservative issues, but don't have this emotional appeal that Trump does. Trump has a way of well, underlining people's fears. With Trump, you can just taste the hatred of immigrants who are going to take your job, or many other ethnic groups who will take your job, who will take your place. The so-called replacement theory, and Trump inspires that. He works to people's fears, but DeSantis and Johnson and some of the other conservatives aren't going to be doing that. So it'll be very interesting to watch whether they can capture the base. And don't know.
There was a
violently disagree with you by saying that Republican conservative in the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm, and they're constantly doing harm. I will never call a Republican a conservative again.
But
Next.
They're not doing harm to full people. The people that they're going after are not really Americans. They're not really people, whatever. It's more a question of if you were really an American, you would believe such and such. You would act such and such. You wouldn't be the wrong color. You wouldn't speak the wrong way. So, in order to preserve the white Christian America that was established in 1776, they're doing all kinds of stuff, but it's okay because they're doing it for the right reason. The people who they're doing it to may not agree. Unfortunately, there's nobody Irish here. Well, actually, Paul, you're half Irish, right? In
I'm half Irish.
Yeah, in 1840s, the Irish flooded America, and the attitude of the people already here was, "Oh my God, these papists, these drunks, et cetera, they're going to destroy America." And then in the 80s, when the Italians came in, oh my God. And then in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910, when the Eastern Europeans came in, primarily the Jews, but other groups as well, the world was going to end. And I've even forgot the Chinese Exclusion Act. After the Chinese built the Transcontinental Railroad, or at least the western part of it, they tried to kick the Chinese out. The Hispanics today, anything that changes the status quo is evil, and you do what you need to do in order to protect what's important, what's critical.
Are you equating this with what is happening in Israel in your mind?
Some of that's going on. There are people in Israel who
you feel that the Jews do have a right to that homeland? And if so, why?
Because they bought it. They followed the norms.
How did they buy it?
With money. With money. I was just describing. They went to the landowners in Beirut and other places and said, "I want to buy this farm." And the guy said, "Okay, give me blah." They gave him blah. They moved a bunch of people in to farm the land.
In Beirut.
Well, no, in Palestine. The landowners didn't live in Palestine. They had tenant farmers, which is a perfectly reasonable way for people to survive. I got some capital. I have some land. You want to work it? Fine. Give me X rent, and everybody's happy.
The Jewish diaspora.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Jews there were in the world at the time.
Let's say
I
12.
don't know what.
12 million.
When did most of them historically? When did they leave? How many
In
left Palestine?
70 CE, there was a second coming. It was a revolution against the Roman hierarchy. And Jesus might have been the first revolution. In 70 CE, there was another one. There was a Jewish general, Bar Kokhba. He led a revolution that for a while had Roman Empire in deep trouble. Finally, Rome was able to take control. Masada, I don't know if you've ever heard Masada,
Yeah.
that was the last fortress of these revolutionaries.
Right.
Once that was settled, 72, 73 Common Era, the leadership of Jewish Palestine was shipped to Rome as slaves. Among other things, they built the Colosseum. Rome with slaves was a little different than south of the United States with slaves. People got the Greeks were slaves before the Jews were slaves, but some of the religions, Christianity, Judaism, among others, started to make inroads among the Romans. There was a point in time where the upper classes were Jewish and the lower classes were Christian. What was it, 400 some odd? Constantine made a political decision that the empire would be Christian. And so the Jews, who were rivals, were basically driven out to some extent. And historically, what would happen is they would go to some of the newer countries where people needed whatever skills the Jews had. They'd be welcomed for a while, and then not so welcome.
To what extent did the Jews leave their homeland? Was it the greater part of the pop? I mean, what was like the impression I got from the little bit that I've read about that particular period, which I find very interesting, is that some Jews remained, but
Right.
they were not active. They were almost they were just there. They had no major function. It was Palestinian land for the most part.
It was Roman land.
It was only when the Jews, pardon me?
It was Roman land. Rome
Right.
won it back.
Yeah. When the Jews decided to come back to that
Right.
land after the Holocaust, especially, the thing that bothers me a little bit is now they went through a lot of discussion, especially with the English at that time, as to where they could find a homeland. And it seems as though this was decided upon, I don't want to say accidentally, but it was almost like it was, there were two or three proposals from what I understand. What I'm getting at is, I do believe that the Jews have a right to be there, and they certainly fought for that right and died for that right subsequently when they did get there. But it seems to me that everything that's going on in Israel and in the surrounding countries now is pretty much based on that decision. From that time on, especially the people who were being released out of camps of whatnot, at the end of the Second World War. You know, they flooded into Israel. I can understand why the Palestinians would be more than distraught. I mean, I could understand why they would want to fight. And since then, the Jewish nation has expanded, rightfully so, because they were forced to fight for that land. But that underlying disagreement still, and that is the reason I think that, you know, this catastrophe that took place recently is part of that. I think. I don't know. I wonder, are they still fighting, believing that that land belongs to the Palestinians, and no matter what?
Hamas,
I wish there was a way that the Jews could somehow make it known that in stronger language that they fought for that land. They earned that land. They had a right to be there.
well,
That has been the overriding question ever since they first came there. They fought, what, 3 wars to stay there. And every war was because they didn't, the Arabs thought that they shouldn't be there. And it'll continue.
what do you do when the media shows millions of people being bombed, being starved? And they are. I mean, there are a couple of million people in Gaza. Right now, they're being bombed. The fact that Israel says, hey, we're going to bomb over here, go away, because we're going to bomb there. That's not normal warfare, but that's okay. It's kind of interesting. The liberal left right now is favoring the Palestinians, not necessarily Hamas, although some may see Hamas as being a natural outgrowth, but they're favoring the Palestinians. It's the conservative MAGA, to a large extent, Republicans who are saying Israel's right. It's an interesting dynamic. And I don't have an explanation other than line up all of the extremists from every area. And, well, I don't believe in shooting people. Stick them in Gaza.
Well, you know, I think, Robert, that as Israel becomes less democratic, that the progressives in the Democratic Party tend to look at it less favorably.
Mm-hmm. And it's real. The extremists everywhere. In every group, there are people who believe that they're right and the other guy's wrong, and they're justified in doing whatever is necessary.
Really.
And lately, the extreme right Jewish groups have taken over the government, and Netanyahu is obligated to do that, to follow them. And that has also created internal problems within Israel. And I don't know how you can fix that part.
They tried. The previous government included, for the first time in Israeli history, Arab parties as part of the government. And the reaction was, in the next election, the extremists gained power.
Mm.
And, oh, by the way, those extremists are not necessarily just anti-Arab. They're questioning whether a whole bunch of the secular citizens, Jewish secular citizens of Israel, are really Jews. They're saying, if you don't get married by me, you're not married. If you are not as the Bible describes, a Jew by birth, you're not really a Jew. you don't count.
However, Israel is not being invaded by those two. They're both of those who believe and those who don't believe are now together fighting for Israel. So yeah, that's internal disagreement, but it's not
For the past 3 weeks, yeah, they're fighting together for the moment, but part of
I
the
would
reason,
disagree, guys. I would disagree. The Orthodox males do not have to fight.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
all right.
true.
Oh.
They have the option. They
What?
have the option not to be drafted.
I cannot
Who-
imagine what it
Who
must be.
has the option?
The chassid, the extreme Orthodox.
Oh,
Oh, they can opt out.
Yes,
They
Wow.
can, yes.
Oh, so they
I don't
can
know how
create
many
division.
are, but
Wow, I didn't know that. Now
Yeah.
the other piece to this is that no matter how much you bomb Gaza to get rid of Hamas, you're never going to get rid of Hamas. That's not possible because you are really generating new generation of people who they will not look at history. What you described and what we all agreed, yes, there is a history that Jews have a right and all that. They're not going to look at all that. They are going to be hard-boiled Hamas militants.
or
That's it.
maybe the name will change. It won't be Hamas.
Yeah,
It'll
there'll be
be
something else.
Islamic Jihad
Yes.
or Hezbollah or pick a name.
Yeah,
The philosophy won't change. And when we're talking about, when Pat was talking earlier about trying to negotiate with some of these groups, understand Hamas is in its constitution, for lack of a better term, they say there will be one state from the river to the sea, and it will be Palestinian. So they are basically saying their ultimate goal will be the eradication of Israel. How do you negotiate with somebody who believes not only that you don't have a right to exist, but that God supports them? So any compromise is actually going against God.
I mean, oops.
Excuse me.
I mean, at the same time, you also have to see that
Right.
the current government
No, just turn it off.
in
That's how we
Iran
do it.
routed out the Shah, who was progressive, who wanted to make the country bring it to modern times. He was routed out, and at that time, the world opinion was, yeah, it's a great idea to have democracy in Iran.